Here we are today at Ed Love Water Treatment Plant. Today we're going to be learning about the drinking water processes we learned about last video and get to meet some of the operators who are the real-life heroes who treat our drinking water every day. Good morning, everybody. Today we're here at Ed Love Treatment Plant, about to learn about all the processes we learned about in the last video in real life. This treatment plant can handle up to 46 million gallons of water per day. 46 million gallons is the equivalent of 46 pools of water that are 267 feet long, 50 foot wide, and 10 feet deep. That is a lot of water. So we're going to find out how all of that water gets treated here. This is our operator who's going to show us around. This is Fletcher. Fletcher, can you tell me where the water at this plant comes from and how it gets here?
Yes, the water comes from Lake Tuscaloosa through miles of piping down the road to our raw water pumping station, which then is pumped up to the plant.
Wow, so this is a surface water treatment plant as we learned in our last video. Let's go ahead and take a look, but first let's learn about what kind of sources treatment plants get their water from. So when we're looking at drinking water treatment plants, we have to consider that they get their water from different places. Some of those places are underground in aquifers or porous media where there's water entrapped inside. So a well typically goes under the surface of the ground to tap those aquifers and bring water to the surface for those treatment plants. That is called groundwater. Other treatment plants use surface water. This means things like lakes or rivers or streams. It's also important for treatment plants to remember their goals. These goals are typically divided into primary standards, which have to do with the quality of the water or how acceptable it is to drink, how many contaminants there are in it. And then there are secondary standards. These are standards to do with the taste and smell and how enjoyable the water is to drink, because nobody wants to drink smelly water that's cloudy and doesn't look good. And then we also have to consider the flow. How much water do we need to treat? How much water do we need to give to the citizens of the community and the businesses and the industries? How much water are they going to need? Primary sources and secondary sources both have different regulations that go on. Sometimes governments will regulate a contaminant reduction. They'll say that a treatment plant has to get rid of a certain amount of a contaminant and reduce it to a certain level. Other times, they'll specify a treatment technology. These treatment technologies can be just a standard type of treatment process that's often used and that has been widely accepted as being enough to get rid of the contaminants. There's some things to consider with both groundwater and surface water. Groundwater can be very salty in some aquifers, and it can also have high levels of calcium and magnesium, otherwise known as water hardness. Surface waters, on the other hand, typically come from freshwater bodies. Sometimes saltwater bodies, but mostly freshwater. And when drawing from surface water bodies, we need to remember that these freshwater bodies are often recharged by elements of the water cycle. So remember, our 5 processes are coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, and disinfection. Here at Ed Love, they also do an initial screening. Because their water is coming from a lake, they don't want any fish or any other material that is really big getting into the treatment plant. So this gets a lot of those big objects out in this initial treatment process. So I'm standing here next to the rapid mix mixers. These spin the water around really quickly. That way chemicals can mix thoroughly with the water. Those chemicals are alum or aluminum sulfate. That serves as a coagulant for the water. And there's lime, which raises the pH of the water and also serves as a coagulant aid to the alum. Both of these chemicals will serve to create the process of coagulation in the water, which is where the charges on all those colloids we talked about last video are neutralized so they can stick together in the next process. You'll notice that there are multiple rapid mix motors here. There's always more than one of everything at a water treatment plant because we want to make sure even if something is being fixed or being cleaned, something is always running, so we always have water running to our homes and our businesses. So here we are at the flocculation basins. Inside these basins, all of those newly neutralized particles are now slowly being mixed with these big motors to create nice fluffy flock. We want to mix it very slowly so flock shear doesn't happen. Flock shear is when the water's mixed too quickly and all of those flock particles tear apart because of the friction from the water. As you can see here, there are multiple of the flocculation basins again. Again, we need more than one of everything at a water treatment plant. In between each of these basins is a wall that extends partway down. The water flows under each of those walls, so it functions sort of like a baffle wall. That ensures that no water cuts through without getting properly mixed. It ensures that each basin gets mixed fully before moving on to the next step. Now we're at the sedimentation basins. As you can see, they're very long to give a lot of room for the flock to settle out. It has to have enough length that all of those flock particles, even the ones at the very surface, have enough time to fall to the bottom before they reach the other side. On the other side, the water is collected in big troughs. But as you can see, there's also scrapers at the bottom of these. Some sedimentation basins have sloped floors and some have scrapers. These scrapers scrape the bottom of the sedimentation, bringing all those settled out flock particles over to a collection trough on this side. That collection trough gets cleaned into a collection pipe down there where it can be shipped off to the solids handling place, which we'll visit later. So here we are in front of the filters. Recall from last video that there are usually at least 3 different layers in a filter like this. These are sand filters, so the top layer is an anthracite coal. Remember, that's less dense than sand. That way, when it gets backwashed or the flow is reversed through the sand filter, that coal will stay on top, so that way everything stays in the right order. Next, our 2 at this plant are layers of sand. There are multiple layers of sand here. Fletcher, can you tell me what those types of sand are and why there are multiple types of sand?
Yes, we have silica sand and then we have garnet. And they change in the fineness of the sand as it goes down, collecting bigger molecules as it goes.
Oh, all right. So it's kind of like the difference between the coal layer and the sand layer, in that bigger particles get caught by the bigger media. That way the finer media doesn't get clogged as easily. That way they don't have to backwash quite as often. Speaking of which, how often do you backwash these filters?
Generally, we aim for every 100 hours, but if head loss goes over 6 feet or our turbidity goes over 0.1 in the effluent, we won't go backwash them.
All right, and remember from last last video, turbidity is the measure of how cloudy the water is. When we look at these filters, we're trying to keep in mind that we want to get the water as clear as possible when it comes out. That last layer of the filter is called the drainage layer, as we learned in the last video. That drainage layer is usually larger blocks that allow the water to drain out, but keep the rest of the media of the filter inside the filter. As you can see, there is still the anthracite on top. That's that black media on the top. You can also see troughs that carry the water away when the filters get backwashed.
We actually just finished backwashing this filter, and as you can see, there are still particles on top of it. The backwashing process is not perfect, but they will filter out as the water goes down.
Here we are in the disinfection room. This is where chemicals such as sodium hypochlorite get added. Sodium hypochlorite is the disinfectant here, so that's what kills the bacteria. Sodium hypochlorite, you might know it as bleach. Just remember, do not add bleach to your water at home and drink it. That's not good. Leave that to the professionals. Other chemicals they add here are fluoride for dental health and phosphate. You can also add phosphate to coat the pipes in the distribution system. That way, you don't have to worry about your pipes corroding and bits of metal pipe getting in your water. Remember from last video that with some chemicals, disinfection byproducts can form. So Fletcher, what kind of disinfection byproducts could form here, and how do we keep them from getting into the distribution system?
The ones we're very worried about are haloacidic acids and trihalomethanes. The ways we prevent those from getting out of the system is the pre-treatment with chlorine dioxide, which actually helps eliminate a lot of the organic material that comes into the plant before it ever gets to our disinfection process.
Oh, that's nice. All right, so there's another approach to eliminating disinfection byproducts. Just eliminate the reactants that produce those disinfection byproducts. All of that water gets stored in huge clear well tanks like the one that I'm standing on right now. They can hold up to 3 million gallons of water.
All right, here we have the Ed Love laboratory. We check for several factors throughout the day. Every other hour we will check for our pH and our raw, our finished, our settled, and our treated water. We will check the turbidity in our raw, finished, and over the weirs on every other basin. We will also check our settled chlorine once a shift, our finished and pre-clear well chlorine every other hour, and then once a night we will check for fluoride, iron, manganese, permanganate, and zinc.
This is the gravity thickening basin. This is where all of the sludge from the sedimentation basins settles even more and gets compacted, so that way it can be better treated in the next part of solids handling, the belt press. So that's how water gets treated. After it's treated, it's sent through a series of pipe systems to your home and mine, so we can enjoy glasses of water. Next time you drink a glass of water, think about all these treatment processes, and maybe consider going on a tour of your own drinking water treatment plant. And make sure to thank your local operator for treating your water. Speaking of which, thank you, Fletcher, for showing us around and for treating our water.
Absolutely. Feel free to come back anytime.
Absolutely, thank you.